And here we are. Welcome to another episode of Talking Triathlon, where two blokes talk about triathlon. One of those blokes normally being Tim Ford, but he's on holiday doing something somewhere. I'm not quite sure where. And I'm here leading proceedings, James Bale, and I'm joined by Andrew Horsfall-Turner, who's going to give his take and his opinion on everything that's transpired in the world of triathlon in the last week. How you doing, Andy?
I'm very good, and what a crazy week it's been.
Hold up, mate. Sorry. We finished. I think we finished. Haven't we finished? Isn't it time to wrap up?
I don't know.
I think we have. I think that's in keeping with the last weekend anyway.
Did you direct me down the tunnel? Or?
I directed you down the tunnel. I've pressed end anyway. How's you, mate? You all right?
Yes, yeah, very well. Yeah, in the mix of my off season, which is pretty cool. Pretty nice to have some time away from, structured training, and yeah, enjoyed. I didn't actually watch the unfortunate events that transpired at the weekend live because I was actually on a stag do. But my phone was absolutely blowing up.
I bet.
And I was absolutely loving it from afar in terms of the drama.
It was quite amusing because I knew you were on a stag do, so I wasn't expecting much out of you. But you responded to quite a few text messages for someone on a stag do. Was it boring stag or something?
So you got me at a good time because let's just say I wasn't the biggest partier on this this stag do. So me and the guy, one of my best mates who was sharing a room with me, we actually we were the early risers. So we were sitting in a nice little coffee shop having a morning coffee when you were messaging me about sort of 9 a.m. So we were having a nice leisurely morning. So yeah, I was very much then scrolling through social media, trying to really kind of understand what was going on. But yeah, from the sounds of it, just utter chaos.
Utter chaos. Right. Before we get to that, because we've got an expert coming in to help dissect the race in a little bit. But before we get to that, you just raced 70.3 Worlds in Marbella. How was your race weekend, man?
Oh, it was incredible. Like, it's obviously my first World Championship experience as an athlete. Just an incredibly crazy race, crazy weekend. The atmosphere, obviously you were there. The atmosphere in town was just, to me, just seemed incredible. Like, everyone was very excited about the event. There was a good number of people there. There was a good number of brands there. Like, the activation of the whole event just looked really good. And then the race itself was, from my perspective, just, actually kind of what I really wanted, which was like a full on, this is a world championship experience. And like this, I got my ass kicked, but in a good way.
It's a strange one though, isn't it? Because you didn't as well.
Yes,
Like,
yeah.
I was with you after the race and we wandered around and we had a few chats with a few people. And I could feel your reason, because people would say, "Oh, how did you get on, Andy?" And instead of saying, "I finished 50th," you were saying, "I finished 22 minutes off the lead."
But I was also smirking at you at the same time.
Exactly. And I can completely understand, because the density of that men's finish was incredible. You finished 22 minutes behind the winner in 50th place, which is astounding. And the amount of people that finished between, I think it was about 7th and you, was just one after the other.
Yeah, and I think that was the biggest thing for me which was, I had aspirations of maybe getting like a top 30 to top 20. I thought, on a good day that was possible. But to do that actually only meant I needed to go like, say, 5 minutes quicker. And then when I then dissect the race, having a slightly subpar swim for me, maybe not quite fully committing or having the watts I wanted up at the first climb, which, established positions and groups. And then my group just not working, and me and Matthias Pettersson just having to do the work with 6 guys just sitting on, which was super frustrating. Take all those factors into account. I swam front pack along with 35 other guys pretty much. I had some decent power on the bike. It wasn't I didn't set any world records, but it was good power and I ran solid off it. So you put that all together and you go, well, actually, if tactically, it was my first tactical experience at World Championships. If I'm just tactically better, I see an avenue I'm 5 minutes quicker without actually having to put
expend
out
that
any
additional
more.
energy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
And what tactical decisions would you make looking back?
The
How do
first
you
one,
tactically do better in that race to get that 5 minutes?
the first one was definitely just the start. I put my first foot forward on the sand and I had a slight slip to the side. And I look back at some of the video and you can see that I'm diving in kind of second row then into the melee and the complete chaos, which is 60 odd pro men sprinting for 300 meters to the first buoy.
I don't want it, mate. I don't ever want it.
And the really frustrating thing was then that I couldn't get out of the chaos because I was in it. So I couldn't use my swimming, my stroke, because I was on the feet of someone in front. There was people both sides of me. So it turned out to be quite a comfortable swim, but I just wasn't where I wanted to be. And I think, if I'd maybe positioned slightly better, got a better dive out of the first sort of 100 meters, maybe that would have enabled me to kind of have that clear, or at least a little bit more clear water to really kind of go with that, especially obviously the Italian guy shot off the front. But it would have been good to be in a position where I was able to try and jump on those feet, but I was maybe sitting in 20th place and getting absolutely smashed left, right, and center. So I didn't have the opportunity to do so, which is, it's completely on me. That's sport, and that's why, you know, it's not a swimming race necessarily. And it's why we go to a race in a world championship to kind of see how it pans out because, um, yeah, a lot of people had bad swims that day. I came out ahead of some really good swimmers. So people like Ben Canute, Rico Bogan, and everyone, they were behind me. And I had I'd say a subpar swim. So, yeah, I wasn't the only one. Let's just say that.
No, no. What did you? Yeah, yeah. Okay, so slightly better positioning on the in going into the swim, and then what? You know, you were with a group of people that weren't working. I don't know what you'd have changed on the bike. Do you know what you'd have changed on the bike?
On the bike, it would have probably just been a bit more like, and again, it's a knock on effect. If I swim slightly better, I get onto the bike in a slightly better position. I start that first big climb closer to the front. And then potentially when I get to the top of the climb, I'm with a few better, or a few more aggressive athletes. So there was a group in front was like, I think a Ben Canute made the group in front, a Rudy Von Berg, and a couple other guys who I've ridden before in races at Texas and a few other races. Like, I know I can ride with those athletes. So I think it would just be a case of having a slightly better swim, being in a slightly better position. You know, maybe I needed to go that percent or two harder on that first climb to stay with that group.
Mm.
But then afterwards, I don't think anyone was necessarily riding any harder than I was. I just think they had better group dynamics with people who are willing to invest energy.
Yeah, and you have a slightly better swim. You come out, like you say, in the right group on the bike. You're not having to. Essentially, you were trying to drag a group up to another group, weren't you? With
Yeah,
people that
and we
weren't
picked up
working,
we
right?
picked up a few stragglers along the way, but ultimately, once me and Matthias took a few pulls, we did try on one occasion to put in a sort of like a 3 to 5 minute kind of attack, and we did get a bit of space. But then then all of a sudden the six guys who are sitting on our wheel decide that they want to make sure they close the gap. It was funny because I was riding with I say a group as in there wasn't very many good athletes in the group. Gustav was in the group, and he was obviously not having a good day. Um, but yeah, it's frustrating because obviously the race is up the road, and I think it's okay to kind of sit back when you're leading the race and you're in the front group. But we weren't the front group, so why are we sitting around?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. What did you think of the venue, the race, being in
Incredible.
Berlin?
Yeah, loved it. Well, obviously brought my whole family out, which and it was just nice to have the week before the race, settling in. Kids were able to go down to the beach, and it was just kind of like a nice temperature as well. It wasn't like boiling hot summer day where you can't really stand outside for long. It was early 20s. It was just perfect for being in shorts and t-shirt. So that kind of aspect of being where we were was ideal. Felt super relaxed, and yeah, it's just, good cafes, good food, just a nice atmosphere, I'd say. And then obviously you bring the circus of an Ironman event there with, I think it was 6,000 people. Um, yeah, just good atmosphere all around, really.
Yeah, it was, wasn't it? It really was. I thought it was a great place to hold a race. I liked the intimacy of it. I liked the fact that you had a lot of people crammed into a sort of relatively small Spanish seaside town. I didn't mind that that made it difficult to get around. It made walking from one side of the event to the other more difficult. But because I think that's a sacrifice you have to make to have these interesting races in places that stimulate you.
Oh, and that basically the hub around where the Ironman kind of where the finish line was, where the transition was, all kind of around the marina there on the run course. That best supporting crowds I've ever seen. It was just, there was DJs blaring music, just people screaming. I'm running around in 50th place. Why are you screaming for me? But it just, you felt like the fans were there for you, and it just created. And I think I wasn't the only one to feel that. I think literally from Yele, who was leading the race with Christian, all the way to the last finisher, I think they felt the same level of atmosphere, which I think is super special because, obviously we all, at any level, we all do the sport for ourselves. But it's cool to feel like a bit like a rock star, you don't get that in many other sports where you go to like a stadium to watch a rugby or a football game. We kind of get that in that middle of town where the crowds are 2 or 3 people deep and just the noise. Yeah, I think it's hard to replicate that in many other sports,
Yeah.
especially at like an amateur level.
And what did you think of the sprint finish in the men's race? I assume you've watched it all.
Well, I have watched it, and Ironman did a really good job of putting out like we can talk about the coverage being, they cut to a
Oh,
body or
we've
whatever.
done
Yeah,
this,
yeah.
definitely in Timberland's.
But what was really cool is they put out the last mile on YouTube.
I saw.
Um, and yeah, just a dogfight. I'd hate to say that I wasn't, I think in that situation I was definitely a KB fan, just because I love his fight. But yeah, just it was just I think it's great to see the competitive nature of these races because, as we said, like, I was in 50th, but 22 minutes you had 50 guys finish, so it wasn't a case of like in some races where you have someone finish and then 20 minutes later someone else finishes and then another 5 minutes someone else finishes. Like, there was pretty much someone finishing like every 10 to 20 seconds. The guy who finished just ahead of me was 18 seconds ahead, and ahead of him there was another guy 10 seconds ahead, and I think it was just nice to see the density of that, and obviously Christian and Yell at the front just duking it out, but they weren't a million miles ahead of Casper either, so it was just exciting racing, I think.
Yeah, it really was. And then we all piled in the car afterwards in the evening, didn't we? Went to the Precision Hydration after party, and just as we arrived, they called the police. So I like to think that we triggered that.
I think that was they heard that James Bell was turning up to a party and they thought, right, we're shutting that down.
That's the one. That's the one. So right now, what we're going to do is, firstly, thank you everybody for listening, and thank you specifically to all our patrons who help keep the podcast alive. We've done a bit of an extended intro there, but I wanted to get Andy's take on Marbella. If you want to join the Patreon, then go to patreon.com/talking triathlon, and all the information is on there. But right now, we're going to hand over to friend of the podcast, Tim Hemming, who's going to give, alongside me, give a bit of an in-depth surgical look at what happened in Dubai. Then we're going to come back and have more of an athlete's perspective view on it from you, obviously not from me. So here you go. Here's Tim.
Forward to it.
Well, as I just mentioned, as me and Andy just mentioned, we're now joined by voice of sanity, Mr. Triathlon journalism himself, Tim Hemming. Tim, how are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Thanks, James. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. What a wild weekend of triathlon racing.
Wild weekend, yeah. I know that we were both in Marbella the weekend before, which was, a busy weekend, flying about all over the place, doing all your reporting. Once that Marbella weekend was over, did you kind of think, did you sort of checked out a little bit and thought, season done, all the drama's done, all the race reporting's done. There's going to be a couple of T100 races, but I'm not going to have a huge amount to talk about. It's just wrapping up the series. Had you checked out slightly, or were you expecting to Dubai to kick off as it did?
I hadn't checked out slightly because we've obviously got the race to Qatar, so that's going to kind of come up in December, and whatever happens with T100 is always newsworthy one way or another. So there was always going to be more to come. The thing that hit me the most was when I was in Marbella talking to some of the athletes who were then going to be racing the following weekend in Dubai. That was what really struck me. And I thought, as a sport, we all had that talk about fragmentation in the sport and how PTO are going to bring it back together. And we just had this great celebration in Marbella. And then the guys who were clearly put their all in there, oh no, just jump straight on a plane and go and race in 40 degrees heat. And that definitely left its mark on me. It's like, that is the life of a non-drafting triathlete right now. I don't know
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a healthy one. And so definitely a bit, Dubai coming in was definitely felt anticlimactic, shall we say. It's just such a quick turnaround. I think it's exhausting for fans probably as well as athletes.
Yeah, I'd say so. I mean, it's the question of how sustainable it is, isn't it? To be racing one weekend and to have your loyalties divided between two. It's not even like one series is putting on these races where you, like back in the days of Super League, Super Tri, whatever it was back then, where it was like a block where you'd race. And that kind of was its own entertainment package in itself. Whereas this is a division of loyalties between two series. And I know Lizzie Rayner, who I work with, she did Marbella, then flew home for 24 hours and then flew out to Dubai. And, that's you're going to get accumulated fatigue doing that level of travel if you hadn't raced.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, for somebody like Lizzie Rayner, it's a great opportunity as well, an opportunity you can't say no to. So the athletes can't really say no, but they're not sure we should be flogging them like horses here. I mean, we're not sure we should be flogging horses, but I think somewhere along the line something's got to give. And I think as we had last year with people reassessed, didn't they, after taking T100 contracts? If you remember, the likes of, I don't know, Kat Matthews would probably be a good example, and said, Laura Phibbs, we're not going to take a T100 contract. We're going to actually go all in Ironman. We're just going to have our focus on that. I think you're going to have a lot of reassessment after 2025 for what people are going to plan to do for 2026, because as we've shown, it wasn't that long ago which we had the women's race in Hawaii, right? And that raised a few question marks about athlete health and athlete safety out in racing in super hot conditions. So as we've shown, like, how much of it's is sustainable, we'll find out. But I expect some different decisions to be made moving on to 2026.
And do you think the Dubai weekend will factor in that decision making?
I don't think that Dubai, I mean, obviously we're going to come up and talk. I'm sure most listeners will edging know by now. We'll know what's taken place, or at least the top line of that. And I don't think it's going to help PTO's chances of athletes sticking with them coming forward for 2026. I know a few athletes have spoken out afterwards, and I think Martin van Riel is one athlete in particular who felt like he'd shown quite a lot of loyalty to PTO with T100. And looking at his statement post race in Dubai, he felt particularly irked by what happened there. So you wonder if that might change his mood for what's going to come next year.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what plays out off the back of this. So obviously going into this weekend, we had the race in Dubai, 100K T100 races, two of them, the men's race followed by the women's. There was a mild crossover, but predominantly you had the men racing first and then the women finishing afterwards. I was expecting a fairly run-of-the-mill race here, mate. I thought it was, the course looked complex from a lapping perspective. It didn't look too interesting. Interesting's not the word I'd use. Complex, I say, is probably right there. But I thought it was just going to play out. I thought Hayden was probably going to take the win. Martin van Riel might have given him a bit of a something to think about on the men's side. But I wasn't expecting anything particularly shocking to happen. We saw Morgan Pearson lead out the swim, and then we saw the bike taking place. We'll talk about the men's race first, and then we'll move on to the women's. The bike is where it started to kick off, and that was where we saw the leaders, Hayden Wilde, Mathis Magier, and Martin van Riel, go past T1, following Hayden, who was leading, and they did an extra lap. Now, what was your interpretation of how that took place and why that took place?
Yeah, so so past T2 there, wasn't it?
Yeah, T2, sorry.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, I think everyone knew what you meant there. Well, it was curious at the time, and just watching the broadcast like other people were, and then the commentary as well. It was pretty unclear um, what had actually happened and why it had happened. And the easy thing to say is athletes need to know their laps. They should be counting their laps, and clearly those three at the front have therefore they've made a mistake, and that's their fault. And ultimately come down to the World Triathlon rulings. That was the decision that was laid out, that they were fundamentally penalised for that. They ended up doing an extra lap and had to suffer the consequences. I have a little bit more sympathy for the athletes than that, though. I think there's a couple of comments come out post that they potentially were being ushered past transition. Not necessarily that it was completely closed off, but clearly, I think Hayden Wilde's come out with a statement to say it really wasn't obvious or clear that they should have come in, and I think it comes to a point where, as you've just said, with such a complicated course, it's slightly setting itself up for failure with that many laps, because if an athlete does become slightly, not quite sure what lap they're on, where's their ability to check? We can all become a little bit it's very easy to say athletes should know what they're doing, but actually, as soon as you get that seed of doubt in your mind, unless you've got somewhere to check that, to say, no, I am on this such and such a lap. And it did seem that there was a lot of confusion all around with this. Then from that moment, you're kind of lost. So
Yeah. Then triathlon isn't Formula One. We're not measuring down to millimeters, are we? You know, courses are different and exact distances differ. So saying you can rely on your GPS again isn't really something that we can defer to, because Hayden's, not only will the course differ, but GPSs will differ as well. My GPS might say 76, whereas yours might say 77 if we go for a ride, or 78, so. And the interesting thing, I think, about because Hayden's taken accountability now and said it was, his fault for not counting his laps. I saw his Instagram post earlier today. He said, look, it's disappointing. I can tell you exactly what he said rather than paraphrasing. First off, in the grand scheme of things, I'm really happy with my race. Solid swim, 50 seconds back off the faster lads, and made a bit of an average call by missing the feet. Felt super comfy in the heat and was able to bridge the front group 8th to 10th, third up the road. After an aggressive ride, I held that form, running well over 16 kilometers, running the fastest split over 16-kilometer mark. Another 3 weeks of building in the heat to prepare for the last dance in Qatar. Yes, I take full accountability for doing an extra lap. I understand it's ultimately the athlete's responsibility to count the laps. I've had a lot of these races coming first into T2 with mostly the same fastest bike split time, so I normally have an idea of the last lap when looking at the total riding time and roughly the distance I covered. On Saturday, the shorter distance and the time threw me off a bit coming into T2. I came out of my TT bars instead of previous laps where I remained in the TT, and then looking into T2, it just didn't look like it was ready. This, along with the total time and distance disconnect, threw me off completely in these split seconds on deciding whether we had a lap to go. And then I got told by someone who I thought was an official, as they were more or less on the field of play, you still had a lap to go, so I kept going. Yes, I should have known the lap I was on and kept count, but when you're at 160 heart rate, head down, and most of the race at 34 degrees C on a complex bike course, chasing down your competitors and trying to also put time into them, counting laps is easier said than done. I just want to race and race hard. And I think that kind of summarizes what you just said. And then to follow that, Martin Van Riel, obviously he posted quite an emotional post after the race, which we will get to. But he's then put out a post later in the day, and he said, at the end of the bike leg, I started taking my shoes off to go into T2 and slightly lost touch with Margier and Wilde. Because of that, there was no bell lap, no lap counter, only 76 kilometers on my Garmin, and no one flagging us into T2 or pointing us in the right direction. To my surprise, I saw Wilde, Margier, and 2 motorbikes that were with us continue. If I'd gone into T2 and been wrong, it would have meant an immediate DQ. When I signalled to people near transition, several shouted that I had 1 lap left. so I decided to continue. No effort was made during the final lap to stop or redirect us, even though we were far in front and there was plenty of time to correct that mistake. Now, what he doesn't mention there is whether that person who told him he had another lap to go with an official or a spectator, because it could have been a spectator trying to be helpful, seeing Wilde and Margier go by and thinking, oh, they must have another lap. Don't stop, Martin. You've got to keep going because your competitors have. So it's a bit of a perfect storm of mistakes, I would say, on the bike.
Yeah, I agree. I think the Garmin thing, as you've already alluded to, is a bit of a red herring. You shouldn't judge the distances. I don't think you can use that, athletes can use as sort of any sort of excuse. I think the confusion around the transition zone, I think that's probably quite valid. And I think there is a wider point, which is probably one that T100 are going to be at pains to address now, is that, again, I saw Becca said it earlier, you're setting the race up for failure with this many laps without the technology to revise. If T100 does want to be the Formula One of triathlon, well, Formula One seem to manage with many, many more laps than this. And I can't ever remember a Formula One race where somebody's done too many laps,
There's an F1 nerd out there, mate, who's wrecking their brains at the moment.
To be honest, mate, I was trying to think of any other sport where we have this kind of similar, and I know we're going to talk about the same thing again, happens pretty much.
I was thinking about Indianapolis 2006, I think, in the F1. Remember the point at which they almost disqualified, at the end of this race, they almost disqualified the whole field. Do you remember that F1 race where only 4 cars finished or something like that?
Yeah,
It was a long time ago. I was a bit of a Formula One fan back in the day, but it reminded me of that a little bit. Yeah, it's an interesting one because we'll get onto the run in a minute. But the question that was going through, I was watching this happen live, so are you probably, and I was watching it with various chats going on as we always do. An interesting question I had was why did they have to go and do an additional 8K lap? Why wasn't there some sort of protocol in place to be like, right, we'll slow you down, we'll stop you, we'll turn you around and we'll get you back on the race course, or DQ you? Why was the only option to do an extra 8K?
Yeah, well, I think it sounds as if the confusion was ripe at that point, so people were uncertain.
Including the technical officials and the people running the race.
Well, we haven't had an official line on that. I think that's the first one, T100, but that seems to be.
Yeah.
What we safely can say is confusion reigned over this entire event.
Confusion did indeed reign over this entire event. Now let me get my hastily written notes here. So then we had the run beginning. We got lead 3 disappearing off the road to do an extra 8K.
Yeah, which effectively puts them out of the race.
Exactly, but they're off doing their own thing. And then Sam Dickinson and Mika Newt come into T2. Sam Dickinson's slightly ahead of Mika Newt. They start running off. They get told they're leading the race. They look bemused when they see no bikes in the racks. And then they get told they're leading the race. And Mika Newt said he got told he was in second place. And they start disappearing to go and do their run. Hayden Wilde comes into T2 just as Sam Dickinson's starting his second lap. So he soon catches him because he's putting on a very fast first lap to try and make some time. They have a little conflab as he goes by. Basically, both of them as confused as each other. Hayden probably thinking they haven't done enough laps. Sam thinking Hayden's done an extra lap. It's in the heat of the moment type thing. Then Morgan Pearson, who's having a blinder because he's done the right amount of laps on the bike and he's running like a machine. He then takes the lead of the race further down the road. And then he gets to the point where he's about to run his final lap on the run and he keeps going, as he should. I don't know. Do you know whether he was told to go to the finish or not? Or did he get through before that mistake happened?
That I don't know. But I did say that he's a maths. He told he was a paint player. He's a maths major, so he could add up to 8.
Yeah, because I've heard differing. I've heard that he just got through before the mistake happened, but I've also heard from someone else that he was told to go to the finish and said, no, I've still got another lap to do and kept going. Either way, he did the right amount of laps. Then Mika Newt comes through. The timing board's broken. and Mika's told to go to the finish and finish. So he's like, okay, cool. Off I go to the finish. He gets to the finish. The tape is up. He said, I've seen him interviewed. I've seen his statement. He said he thought maybe it was like, they just have the tape for the first 5 finishes type thing, like they do at other races. So he does a little celebration. Then he's told he's won. And then I can only presume that maybe he thought, well, maybe Morgan had an injury or something, or pulled out the race or whatever. He doesn't know at that point. So he does a little celebration, kind of looks a bit sheepish, and then disappears. And then all the other athletes start trickling in, all at different places, different placings. And then they're all arguing in the finishing enclosure. Hayden finishes and he's like, this is meant to be professional racing. What's going on? They cut away from him, sharpish. And then the funniest bit was when the final, not Morgan Pearson, because he was the final, but the final one in the actual finishing order of this phase 1. He finished and he just slowed to a walk, took his sunglasses off, looked confused, and just was like, why is everybody here arguing? Then Morgan Pearson comes in. He's expecting an empty finish chute. He gets there and it's just the entire field stood around, no tape, nothing. And he just sort of sheepishly finishes and then starts protesting. So my question to you, which I'm assuming you've got an answer for, who's at fault here?
Well, Morgan Pearson's clearly not at fault because he did the full course and won. Mika Newt is clearly the most bemused man on campus, because when he starts the run, he's all of a sudden jumped 3 places and he's doesn't know what's happening.
He comes into T2 and he's got 2nd place, having thought he was in 5th or something, and he gets to the end and he's won it by not passing anybody.
Yeah, and then to back it up, he gave a little statement about 2 hours after the finish where the protest was still going on, and he still didn't know what was happening. So his was almost farcical situations. As T100 were at fault. I don't think we can apportion any blame to the athletes because they have been instructed to then come in by the lap counter board and everyone else at number 7. And then I'm sure you've got the final rulings after the 13 athlete protests were put in. They all had a vote on it, and then they came up with numerous different quirks of decision making.
I've got a few comments on this because there's that whole like, the athletes should count their own laps. But in reality, is an athlete going to go against the timing official who's telling him that he's finished the race and he's meant to go in? Are you going to say, no, I'm not. I'm counting my own laps and I'm doing this? I mean, you're just going to do what you're told, aren't you, in the heat of the moment? If someone's saying the race is over, you've got to go to the finish, then that's what you're going to do. Another element of that is if this whole athletes count their own laps is the answer, then should the T100 be providing any assistance for lap counting? Because if you're expected to count your own laps and it's entirely on you to make the right call, then should they be providing any information at all? Or is it just going to disrupt things by providing information that may or may not be right in the moment?
I don't know. I disagree with that. They should be providing all the information, and they should be providing the information without fault, so that athlete knows where they are at all times. I mean, we're looking at the best swim, bike, and runner. We're not looking at some adventure racing here where athletes have to stick to the. Yes, agree with you. That's not what we're trying to achieve.
No, I agree with you. What I'm saying is, I'm trying to just make the point that it's totally not the athlete's fault. I'm agreeing with you on that as well, because I don't think the argument the athletes should be counting their own laps holds any water, because the T100 do provide information. And so if it's entirely the athlete's fault, the responsibility to count their own laps, then the T100 shouldn't be providing any information, and they do, and it should be right, and it wasn't. So therefore, I think it's an organizational issue, and they admitted that, and they held that vote. So afterwards, what should have happened? Because
just a quick sort of to make the difference between age group racing and pro racing, then, which I think is kind of valid, is this is professional racing. This is quite different from you and I going out and doing an age group race, which will have multiple laps, and they're the responsibility amongst hundreds or even thousands of other competitors is very much ours to make sure that we do the correct distance. Now, I'm sure if you had an age group race where there was 8 laps, you are going to run into far more trouble with runners doing either too few or too many laps, many times over, like we did in Dubai. But I think there's a very clear difference between pro racing and age group racing, and it's incumbent on the organisers to make sure their systems are in place. So these mistakes simply don't happen, because it's clearly embarrassing and sort of a costly embarrassment to everyone.
Could not agree more. And not only is it broadcast sport, but there's hundreds of thousands of pounds on the line as well. And then you get into a situation where the athletes are taken away after all the protests at the end and asked to vote on what they think should happen. So you've got, I think it's 4 athletes who've done the correct distance of the race, and then you've got 13 who haven't. And we were in a position where it was looking like, at one point, I'm told by some of the athletes, it was looking like one of the options was disqualify all those 13 and have just 4 people finish the race formally, or, as they did, which is take it back to lap 7 of the run and have that as the finish, which, again, I'm told is World Triathlon's contingency plan, and then cut the race there, and then the athletes got to vote on that, which, on the face of it, very democratic way of doing it. Is it, though? Because if you're the 4 athletes who've done the correct distance, and you're technically finished 4th, 3rd, you're going to get a sizable paycheck, but you're being asked to vote against your best interests in terms of peer pressure and what your peers think of you and fair play and all of that. And fair play is very important, but so's earning a bit of money when you may not earn money the rest of the time because you might have finished 18th, 19th, 17th, whatever. What's your take on that being the way to sort this out, or should they have had just a formal race decision by a technical official?
They should have had a formal race decision, I think. I don't think you should go to defer to athlete vote and put and like you just outlined, either put the pressure on the athlete to make a vote. I think that's pretty clear, and I don't really know why they do that. They need to stand up, take responsibility, take decisions. However, by the time it's got to this point, we have a fundamentally flawed situation, because we've had 2 major mistakes that have effectively happened, and then the rules could be seen as being quite contradictory in how they've been dished out from the bike, where it is entirely down to the athletes who have ended up doing that extra lap, and then down to the run where athletes that came in a lap further early and bear no fault whatsoever. So it very much feels as if it's somewhat making it up as we go along, shall we say. And I think in terms of World Triathlon and the rules allowing for it to finish after the end of lap 7, so eventually cutting the run short in the World Triathlon rule book. But then World Triathlon rule books tend to give a scope for a lot of decisions, shall we say, that fit the best result that you feel that you can somehow configure from a horrible situation, and they've got themselves in such a pickle with this one. No decision that they made was ever going to be universally liked.
No. So ultimately we ended up with Morgan Pearson winning the race, being given the win at the end, Mika Newt in 2nd, Gregory Barnaby in 3rd, Jason West in 4th, Vincent Louis in 5th, Sam Dickinson in 6th, and then onwards, leaving the overall standings with Hayden Wilde still leading in the series ahead of Yella Gaines, ahead of Mika Newt, ahead of Ricker Bogan. Do you think, let me get my hastily written notes back up again. How do you think the T100 as an organization handled this, both in the moment and then in terms of the fallout afterwards?
I think once the moment had happened, they were quite stuck at that point, because it needed to forethought that something like this wasn't going to happen in the first place, and no doubt they will learn the lesson from this. You could probably argue, or you should definitely argue, it's something that should never, really have happened, to be honest. Um, but I'm sure, they will learn the lesson. I think the statement that was put out saying we ended this effectively the first statement that I saw was we ended it on lap 7 and therefore the result will stand. But at that point, it didn't say whether it was lap 7 on the bike or lap 7 on the run. It felt like, even though it was only a few words, it felt like it was a rush statement to get something out, as if at this point they were in panic mode. And given the time it took for the protest to go through, clearly they were struggling to kind of officiate post race on this one. But I think the damage was done because the mistakes had already happened. So whatever else they were going to do was only ever going to be damage and imitation. And on that score, they've probably done okay. I think they've come out and they've apologized. And actually, what I think is the backlash was so big initially, which was quite a lot of instant reactions from athletes, and then also instant sort of outpouring on social media, that there's now been a backlash to the backlash. So you'll probably have seen quite a few statements, which is effectively, come on, people, get a grip. They're a young organization. They're doing great work for the professionals. They put in millions of pounds. If it wasn't for them, Ironman wouldn't have done the Ironman Pro Series. We've had athletes making comments like, I stand behind PTO, don't bite the hand that feeds me. So I think it's actually flipped around quite well for them. And perhaps the other thing is, the idea is to grow triathlon into much more of a mainstream sport. But I think within the triathlon communities, a kind of snafu like this, if you like, in Dubai that's happened, which is ultimately it is completely farcical, doesn't really cut through to the wider mainstream. I mean, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's on social media. It's within triathlon.
In the confines of our bubble. Yeah.
Exactly. But had something like this happened in a Grand Prix, had something like this happened in a Champions League football match, for example, it would certainly have been picked up and kind of headline news.
I did see one article in the mainstream media somewhere that someone dropped in, but it was badly written, and they had the wrong commentators and the wrong laps and everything. So it was just a cacophony of misinformation. Other than that, I haven't seen it in the mainstream media. And you're right, we saw Martin Van Riel put his hasty statement out after the race, where he said something like, shout out to the real winner today, which is Ironman Tri, and they should have the professional world removed from the name of the organization. And since then, we have seen people come out and be a bit more defensive. Will Draper, for example, and Philippe Azevedo have come out and backed the PTO and released statements saying, look, mistakes happen, errors happen. We just got to move on and move forward now.
I think also there's a lot of people on social media who just wanted to take the piss. And these people take the piss in the best of situations anyway, and they take the piss in the worst of situations. And this was just a perfect opportunity for a load of memes or a load of whatever, or just to take the mickey. So you're going to get those sorts of things. And from what I've seen of T100, they've actually handled that quite well.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you're right. I think within it is very much an echo chamber sometimes, with all the same voices talking at each other. In terms of the T100 as an organization, though, they would have had people, backers, investors, people that are involved with their organization see this take place. Do you think it has any implications on them going forward as an organization? Does this affect their is this just a little speed bump and we all get over it and move forward and we go to Qatar and then it's 2026 and on we go into the sunset? Or do we see this single event having implications on the organization going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It depends on the investors' personal views. I think largely it's a little speed bump. No, unless you get a situation where an investor goes, well, actually, I really don't like what I saw here. I thought that was unprofessional. I'm invested in this product, and as we've seen with the direction that PTO are taking, they might say I'm invested in this project because I believe age group racing is the way forward, because that's ultimately where we're going to make our money. why are we messing around with the pros when they're that difficult? We have to do these multi-lap courses for them, and there's potential for these things to go wrong and make us look like idiots. In fact, let's just pull back even more from pro racing and let's focus more on the amateurs.
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that as well. And going back to your comment about taking the piss, I did enjoy Jan Frodeno's response to Martin Van Riel's initial statement, where he just put a comment underneath and said, "Did Ironman teach you to count?" So overall, mate, what have you thought of the T100 so far this year? Before we get onto we will do a summary of the women's race and what happened, but it was much less dramatic and much more as expected. But what have you thought of the T100 as a series up to this point?
I think it's. I don't know if it jumped on huge leaps and bounds from what we saw in 2024. I know there has been, Martin Van Riel actually alluded it to, didn't it, in terms of venue changes and the light. And he planned his season, and then with things shifting around late, that's not been particularly helpful. I do think they have a challenge around athlete loyalty to make sure you have all of the top athletes racing in T100, which I don't necessarily think has happened. It's clearly been the Hayden Wilde show on the men's side. And I think we'll come to the end of the season and, he'll be the dominant player, which isn't not necessarily a bad thing. And when you look at the women's leaderboard, then it's set up for what could potentially be a great race in Qatar, an exciting race in Qatar. But the venues have perhaps been less than inspiring a lot of times, and certainly from a fan interaction perspective, when you compare it to, we were both in the Ironman World Championship in Marbella, and sometimes that makes you think, well, actually having just a few of these marquee events rather than trying to have, push for 10, 11, 12 races in a season, perhaps that would be a better way forward. I have seen actually quite a few comments recently where people going, actually, when they were looking at doing 4 opens in a year, that would have been the better way for it to go. But yeah, we'll roll on for 2026. Obviously, they've got some investment from Saudi. They've got the deal with Qatar. We haven't seen the race in Qatar yet, so could be a crowning pinnacle to the season, or it could feel like we're racing around in a bunch of tumbleweeds. So,
do you think separating the men's and the women's races out next weekend will have it make any difference at all to
do you mean next year or
next year?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's probably more fragmentation in some ways, and it just, as they lean more in towards age group racing, it is probably actually that the focus on the professionals. I mean, if we take the prize money as a round, it's being reduced quite substantially, I believe, for 2026. So I think that shows where their direction of travel for the organisation as a whole. So I don't think necessarily splitting the men's and women's is particularly a great move. I mean, they may well do more with what is now WTCS. We'll see whether that name changes, whether they work more closely with World Triathlon. Of course, it is a World Triathlon sanctioned event, all of their bases now. So really, it should be held to exactly the same standard as all the World Triathlon races. And I think an example of where it wasn't was when we saw the Hayden Wilde non-disqualification for wearing shoes that he shouldn't have been wearing, and the French Riviera race, wasn't it? And the general thoughts were that, well, we don't check the shoes in T100, but we do check the shoes in WTCS. We think, well, really, guys, they're actually supposed to be aligned and supposed to be the same. So I don't know really in a sport like this whether there's really the space for WTCS and T100 racing on top of each other as well. I know if you're super into triathlon, you'd be like, well, yeah, that's great. It's just, the more the merrier. But if you're stepping into this sport you're looking at Ironman, you're looking at Ironman 70.3, you're looking at T100, you're looking at WTCS, you're looking at super sprint racing. Yes, that's quite a lot to get your head around. I don't know whether that's good for the sport as a whole. What is all this?
And then break WTCS down into its various elements as well, with different racing formats and road cups and etc. Yeah, so it's a complex sport to jump into. So then after the men's race happened, we had the women's race. Jess Learmonth led out the swim. Julie Derron took control on the bike, led into T2 with 23 seconds lead, I think it was, and then was just imperious on the run and didn't look to be giving away anything. She ran a 1:03.22 ahead of Kate Woff's 1:06.18. So Julie Derron totally in control, really, from gun to tape. Took the win ahead of Kate Woff. Third place, Jess Learmonth. Fourth place, Georgia Taylor-Brown. Fifth place, Holly Lawrence, leaving the overall standings with Kate Woff leading ahead of Julie Derron, Lucy Charles-Barclay, Ashley Gentle, Jess Learmonth. So we've got a three-way battle going into Qatar on the women's front. What did you think of the women's race, mate?
Well, I think it was entirely overshadowed by the men's race, to be honest. I think, well, Julie Derron's came back from injury, so that was she's shown, haven't she? She's shown certainly in the last 2 years, and it'd been brewing before that, what a good athlete she is. It sets it up beautifully for Qatar, and I think that Kate Woff is having, pretty roundly criticised T100 throughout all our discussions so far. I think actually it does certainly work brilliantly for certain athletes, and Kate Woff, who's decided to focus her entire season on T100 racing and stepped up and had some great performances and amazing results, it has really played to her benefit. So for that side, for opportunities for female athletes, well, any athletes, they're prepared to focus on it.
Yeah, I agree. I think
There's a lot there, but it wasn't one of those races that we're going to be, oh, do you remember when? Remember when that race happened? I don't think that's going to be the case. So we didn't have Taylor Nick there. We didn't have Lucy Charles-Barclay there. And those are two athletes who have a certain sort of vision about them, I think, and they're just excited, a bit like Hayden Wilde, perhaps, on the men's side, or as Alistair Brownlee used to be. They're the athletes who you really want to watch. And like, is that disrespectful to the women that race there? I think actually they're getting to that level. With Kate Woff being consistently on the podium, you certainly keep an eye out for her. Jess Learmonth is going to be at the front of the swim, and then really going to be attacking the bike. And that Julie Derron is one of the fastest runners, probably top 3 fastest runners, if not even better. And so you always keep an eye out for her. So yeah, a lot of quality, and at least we have something to shoot for in Qatar. Looking at the points for that, it actually really does come down, doesn't it, to that race?
it really does. Yeah, the race and it's worked out very nicely on the women's side. Obviously, on the men's, it's the Hayden show, and if I was him, I would be racing T100 next year as well, and banking his ability to earn money here. On the women's side, we've really got a three-way battle going into Qatar, and it's going to be quite exciting to see how that shakes out. Who's going to take it, Tim?
If only. I mean, you would think with Derron, given that she's had that enforced break, because she missed Ironman World Championship in Hawaii. So given she's had that, and then she's battling back coming back from that, and as we've seen, she's in good shape. She should probably be on the upswing. You'd think. But then having said that, like we said, Kate Woff's dedicated her entire season to this, so she's got her training right. She should be looking to be peaking in Qatar as well. So I think
and Lucy Charles-Barclay is Lucy Charles-Barclay, isn't she?
She is, and actually what happened in Hawaii, as we saw in Marbella, hasn't phased her.
No.
So therefore, she has enough time, and we have another 3 weeks, I think, until we're racing in Qatar. So she's also shown actually at T100 racing this year, perhaps for the first time over T100 racing, that she's got the ability to be there on the bike in a pace line, not have to be out front solo, and showed another way that she can win the race by coming back and winning it on the run. So she probably wouldn't fancy a head-to-head with Derron on the run, but if she can ditch it, and of course, as we know, if you have the firepower of Charles-Barclay and Learmonth at the front of the swim, that can just set the race up differently.
Yeah, it really is. I love having Jess Learmonth in these races. She does bring real firepower to that swim and then onto the bike. And watching her improve as she came back from that calf injury and go up through the gears, I'd really like to see her. I'd like to see the three-way race going into Qatar, and however it works, it works. Whoever wins it, wins it. I'd love to see Jess Learmonth take that victory, though.
Yeah, that would be great. I mean, Jess Learmonth is not. I don't have the stats in front of me, but she's not your race winner. Historically, she hasn't been. Um, she's been plenty of times she's been on the podium, but I think even back to, was it as far back as like Rotterdam World Final? May have that slightly incorrect, but she was getting a second place. I think she was second place in the Commonwealth Games, I think, in 2018 from memory, because she's got the ability to completely change the race, take away a small pack at the front. I know it's not pack racing, it's non-drafting sport here, but she's got the ability to whittle the race down so much that therefore, she's one of the women that can get the podium. But of the run of the three disciplines, the run is her weakest discipline. So there's typically been a faster runner there. So she doesn't get as many Ws as perhaps her career is deserved. But if you look back on her career since she came into the sport, she's got a hell of a lot of podiums, and there's probably not a race she's been in that she hasn't affected in some way.
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing to mention in this Dubai result was we had two mums in the top five, which is always amazing to see. And I love to see Holly Lawrence coming back and doing as well as she is after she's come back from having a baby.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to be. I would say it doesn't seem to be a factor. Of course, it's a factor, but it's something that athletes feel that they can start a family and they can come back as strong, if not stronger. And there are certain challenges. I think before Marbella, where Jess raced, I think she had it was slightly sleepless nights leading into that race. So I don't think she perhaps had the 70.3 world that she had wanted, but so you do throw an extra dynamic sometimes in there. But what can you do about that? And of course, no parent's going to change it, are they? So
No, totally not. So before I let you go and we get back to chatting with Andy to finish this episode off, what are you looking forward to in triathlon at the moment, mate? What's 2026? What's lighting your fire for 2026?
oh gosh, that's a good question. Um, well, I haven't thought that far ahead. Is the first thing. I regularly don't think much further ahead than next week. I can't say the Commonwealth Games, can I? Because that's not actually taking place in 2026, right? Which is, even though the Commonwealth Games is in Scotland, we don't have any Commonwealth game. I think that's something that should certainly be questioned. Like, why have we not got that? Um, I think Hawaii next year, because being the combined race, will be big. I think there'll be huge focus on that. I think the 70.3 will probably be going strength to strength. It's in Nice next year, isn't it? So as we know, that's a venue that welcomes triathlon, and it's a great course. I think that's going to be a great race. And then also, I think if we're looking at the short course, we'll have athletes who are going to refocus their efforts because for these athletes, it's the chance to start really focusing on Olympic points. And they know they need to get Olympic points, and it's tripped up nations in the past who have not got Olympic points in the first half of the cycle, and then they've been left floundering in the second half as the games have closed in to try and win those slots for the country as we look forward to LA. So I think where you've seen athletes that, like I guess of Alex Yee, who've taken a different road this year and concentrated on other things. Georgia Taylor Brown is another athlete who said she will be back with an Olympic focus as from next year. So that racing should go up a level, and it will be interesting to see whether, Matt Hauser, who was formidable this year, whether he's raised the bar further, or whether when Alex Yee and if Hayden Wilde steps back into challenge again, whether they are still a cut above. So that would be fascinating to see. And then from the women's side, we have the Beth Potter, Cassandra Beaugrand rivalry, which obviously imploded hugely in Wollongong. And this is the thing, right? Because we've not discussed that at all. And then you think back and you're like, oh well, that was only, a month ago, there wasn't, a few weeks ago. It ended exactly in a hugely dramatic race for a world title. Those two going head to head, and they've built up quite a rivalry over these last few years as well, which should be really highlighted and headlined much more. But you'd think that they'd both be going in as certainly favourites for that series, as long with plenty of the German women. I would have thought. Lisa Turch, now obviously the defending world champion. So
Yeah, which is, I mean, I didn't watch that race live, but I woke up to many, many, many messages about it, and I did rewatch it, and what a race! I mean, they blew each other up, didn't they?
Yeah, I think there was a bit more to. I think there's, as often with these cases, I think there was perhaps a little bit of illness involved somewhere along the line there. But I think for that race itself, we've had a history of the men's grand final on the WTCS becoming not going to script, and we've had, often it might be a French athlete coming out of the blue, Leo Berger or Dorian Connings, or someone who's become the world champion, and you've had to do some quick maths, and you're like, well, nobody saw that coming. But this year it was on the women's side, and I don't think anyone would have picked Lisa Turch to win that day as a world champion.
No, probably.
Good to see.
Probably not her either at the start of the day.
Probably not. Probably not. But yeah, so I think, all of those things are, on the calendar, and they should be, if you follow the pro racing scene, I think those are things to keep an eye on. But I'm sure there'll be some stories. Yeah.
More importantly, what about your health and fitness going into 2026? I know that we both did the relay at the T100 in London. You beat me by 1:14 or something over 5K. Is there a rematch ahead, or are you racing yourself next year, or was that you just beat me and retired?
No. I did say this year that I would do more events. So I have done more events this year. I did. What have I done? I went up to do like a half iron distance race locally, which was pound flat. And I'm sure any decent athlete would have beaten me. Obviously, we had that match we had that shootout in London, didn't we? So I'm pretty sure you were coming back from injury though. So I think, typically you'd have definitely taken.
You beat me fair and square, mate.
And yeah, next year I did a marathon actually in Poland a month ago, which was fun. I had a friend over there, and I wanted to go and see him. He was running the marathon. He was looking to break sub 3 hours, and it was the one opportunity I got. So I said, yeah, I'll go and run it anyway. Why not? I'll run it. But because I've not done any long running, I started relatively slowly, and I did a huge negative split. And it's always fun when you're running a negative split marathon, because you can take people. You want to tie our up.
So at the time, join your mate for his sub 3, or did you?
No, I didn't. I thought I'll just go at 8 minute miles for the first half, and then thought I've got good enough legs, so I think I picked it up and I ran. I think it was 1:45 out, 1:35 back, and it was fine.
Oh, well done.
It's a nice way of running. It's coward's way, but it's a nice way. It's
comfortable negative split.
Passing, but yeah.
Yeah, no, well done, mate. Well, look, really appreciate you coming on and having a chat and helping me break this down. You are my go-to source of objective thought sometimes when I need someone to step in and be like, right, what actually happened? So where can people find you, mate, if they want to find out more and pick your brain more?
Well,
We're not looking for your address. We're talking about like on.
Yeah, I mean, I still write for Triathlete in the States, and I still write for 220 Triathlon, who still have the magazine. So I still do a monthly column for them, and I still do various articles. But yeah, if anyone's, I'm always a gunner for hire as well. If people want something written, then I'm happy to. Still love the sport, still love following the sport, and there's a lot of characters, as we've seen actually over this past weekend. There are a lot of characters in the sport, so it's all good.
Cool.
Good times.
Always a pleasure, mate. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Nice to chat, James. Cheers.
Well, that was awesome. Andy won't have heard it, but I was part of that interview, so I know what
Looking
Tim
forward
said.
to it. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to it already.
We basically went through what happened. We talked about the implications in the moment, the implications afterwards, how it was dealt with. I know that I gave you the homework because you were away this weekend of at least watching a highlights package and understanding what happened in that race. I know you've been bombarded on social media with memes and videos and playbacks. What are your thoughts on what happened in the men's race, specifically in Dubai, and the fallout afterwards?
It's just, yeah, as you said, it's not like it's one of those situations where you it's kind of hilarious to watch, but at the same time, it's kind of not hilarious to watch because you want you don't want a professional race to kind of turn into utter chaos, in which it did because, we were I don't know how long exactly, but you were an hour, 2 hours after the men had finished, and we still didn't know who had won the race. Um, which in a sport where it's pretty clean cut, who crosses the finish line first, you win sort of thing, is pretty remarkable. But yeah, I think, the way I look at it is it was a combination of some mistakes from athletes and some mistakes from organization or organizational volunteers or whoever they were who kind of misguided people. And Tim probably gave a much better explanation of it. But that's kind of the way I look at it, which is, we go to a briefing, you have course maps, course details before the race, you have an opportunity to ask officials, and you have all these kind of like, you know, you have the opportunity to learn the course, basically. Um, the the fact that they shortened the course to only 76K was a bit strange because it's loop course to just make it accurate. I don't know how they can't do that. But that's one thing. But I think the biggest thing for me is that, ultimately athletes are responsible for completing the course. And if they don't complete the course, then they cut the course and they're DQ'd. So um, I think I have a pretty clean cut opinion on it, which is I would have liked to see there only be 4 people on the finishing list and the rest of them be disqualified, if I'm honest. I know it sounds a bit controversial.
No, no, no. I'm
And I'm
intrigued by this from an athlete's perspective because I've never raced as I've done triathlon many years. So I know what it's like to be in a race situation, and I know how, when you're tired, the first
you make bad decisions.
well, the first place your brain starts leaching extra sugars from is your brain.
Yeah.
Your body, sorry, the first place your muscles start leaching extra sugars from is from your brain. So you start to lose that ability to calculate and to think. When you're in the swimming pool, you're counting laps. When you're in a marathon, you're trying to figure out, if I continue at this pace, when am I going to finish? Or you're in a half Ironman, and you're like, right, if I run this, what's my overall time going to be? And you just can't fucking do it.
Mm.
So I'm intrigued as to your perspective on extrapolate that into a professional setting where you're at like absolute threshold. You're trying to put time into competitors on the bike. How easy is it to actually stay on top of your lap counting?
I think it should be that I don't think it should be that difficult. Um, ultimately, it's not like they're trying to count to like hundreds of numbers. So they're counting to 8 laps. So it's not ridiculously high number. Um, I think I kind of look at it and I compare it to different sports. So I think of like ultra running, for example, where a lot of ultra running, if you run off course, you just have to correct yourself and carry on. Um, I also look at sports like swimming, for example, I used to race like lots of 200s and 400s, and say a 400-meter in a short course pool, which is 25 meters long, is like 16 lengths. And I've seen athletes time and time again try and finish 2 lengths early, and then they look at the clock or they see the officials and they're like, oh crap, I finished 2 lengths early, and they push off and they finish the race. I've also seen people tumble turn at the end of a 400 race and do an extra 50. And triathlon is a little bit more complex because we have the 3 disciplines and we're shifting from sport to sport to sport. But to me, any kind of error in distance I still feel like it falls back onto the athlete. Um, if transition was legitimately not open and the fences were up and like Hayden couldn't ride into it, then I'd be like, well, then there's an issue because
So we're talking about the bike element of this.
yeah, the bike element. So for the bike element,
We're not
especially,
talking about the run yet, because what you're saying is directly contradicting what I thought.
okay. So yeah, for the bike element, especially, I think Hayden, Martin, and Matthias, that's definitely on them. It's a mistake. It's a mistake they probably will never
What do you
get.
do if you're expecting 80K? I know that races can be off and Garmin's can be off, but you're expecting 80K and you get towards T2, and you see 76 on your Garmin.
If my
What do
Garmin's
you think?
saying if my Garmin's saying 76.8 and I know that they're 8 point whatever K loops,
You just
I'm thinking we're done because triathlons are notorious. I've done loads of Iron like 70.3s and Ironmans, and sometimes they're 87K long. But I'm not
the Garmin's not
Yeah, your Garmin
almost
isn't.
irrelevant. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the knowledge of they've just done these laps and how long a lap is, like, it's over 8K long, I think the lap was. So
Couple
the
the
fact
margin of error with a Garmin and the
Yeah,
margin of error on the course, you
you're
could have
not
up
gonna
to 2 to 3K difference.
yeah, and I'm not gonna be doing another 8K loop if I'm, a couple of K short of or a few K short of the distance, especially because I think they said in the briefing it was meant to be. I don't think they ever said it was an 80K loop. I think they said it was short. So, yeah, they might have said it was 78, 79, whatever they said. So if it's saying 76, you're like, well, it's meant to be short anyway. So they've just, you know. So I think 100% the athlete's responsible there. I feel bad for them because the three of them were in a very good position. They're having a good bike
I feel particularly bad for Matisse and Martin
because they
because
needed the points for the series
I think Hayden made the mistake
and they followed.
and they followed. And then
Mhm.
Martin specifically said that he started to take his feet out of his shoes and get off his tri bars, and somebody shouted, "You've got another lap." Now, that person who shouted may or may not have been official. It may have just been a spectator who saw Hayden go by, saw Matisse go by, and that spectator might have just been trying to help and said, "Oh no, they've gone by. You've got another lap." So I don't know, but
It,
I feel for him in his rage.
yeah, but I guess it's like you feel for them, but you wouldn't necessarily rectify the decision of it because
I know,
you
absolutely.
know because I think there's two things there. You feel bad for them. They've made a mistake. They've lost 8 minutes, 7 minutes, whatever the time, extra time they had to ride was for. But you'd also feel bad for them if they'd got a puncture or if they'd snapped a chain or kind of any level of like things that can go wrong especially in a bike race. So I put it down to more just like, well, it's unfortunate for them, especially following Hayden, but I think the onus was still on all of them to get the distance right. And ultimately, if they want to go down the route of these laps in the future, maybe they need to be more creative about, lap boards and kind of waving people in a bit better. And if that's the route they go, then the organization will have to take more ownership over that decision.
Yeah.
But because they haven't taken ownership over it up to now, it is known as an athlete responsibility. Um,
I mean, we know that the organization will respond to this in a way that makes the entry to T2 on that bell lap clearer. We know,
Very, very clear.
but
Yeah.
they still, in my opinion, they should still push back on taking responsibility for counting laps on the bike.
Yeah,
You
and I
know,
think
they should say, right, we'll do what we do to make it clearer and to make it more obvious, but it is still your responsibility to count your laps on the bike.
yeah, and if you get it wrong, I think the onus has to always be on the athlete.
I felt a bit sorry for them that they had to do a full 8K.
Yeah, again,
Come on,
I feel
stop.
bad, and I feel bad, and if I was one of them, I would be fuming. Like I'd a bit, not maybe not quite as aggressively fuming as Hayden was, but I would be pretty pissed off.
Oh,
Um,
if I was on the ground and I watched you fuck off for an AK, I'd be you dumb fuck.
but then
Especially if you were leading.
I guess the shift then comes onto the run element where there was already obviously this confusion of the lap, and I think because no one in an official position had said to like Hayden in transition, be like, Hayden, you've done an extra lap, you know, it is what it is. Like, you carry on running if you want to run, whatever. But he then went on to the run course and was like asking people questions. So he was obviously unlapping himself, and he was asking like Sam Dickinson like the distance on his, and it was like Hayden's then interfering with other people's races.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because then you've got Sam Dickinson potentially thinking to himself, have I cut a lap of the bike course? Am I going to get disqualified?
Yeah. I felt like this. I mean, both of them were at a bit of a loss, but one of them had done the right thing and one of them
Yeah.
hadn't. And I felt a bit like Hayden's interjection into Sam's race in that moment could have had implications. Sam could have been like, well, am I going to get DQ'd? Should I stop?
Should I stop running? Yeah, exactly.
Do.
It's that kind of whole penalty at Frankfurt situation with Ditlev where it just completely, it's a bit of a mindfuck, isn't it?
Yeah.
So there, I think, but sorry, I was just going to say on that, and I think the organization failed then because they knew, or they realized very quickly, that Hayden, Matthias, and Martin had gone wrong and done an extra loop. There should have been someone in an official position notifying them in T2 that they have gone wrong. Then there's no repercussions. They've just done extra distance. That's fine. Carry on. But they needed to kind of notify them then, so that the anger and the situation then didn't trickle into the rest of the race.
Yeah.
And that was kind of like that isolated incident of them going wrong. We've drawn a line under it. It's done. You can be pissed off after the race. That's absolutely fine. But this is what you've done. You've gone wrong. Like, carry on.
Yeah, and don't, like you say, don't carry those feelings into the run, and you're sort of semi-arguing with people as you go past them.
Well, yeah, at least
accusatory. Well, you haven't done enough.
Well, then, yeah, at least if Hayden's running past Sam, he can like in a pissed off manner, can be like, I've done an extra bloody lap on the bike.
Yeah. Rather than the sort of strange,
unsure nature of it. And I think that unsure nature of it was just, it was painful to watch a little bit. It was entertaining, but it was also painful because you're like, the athletes just seemed confused.
Yeah, they did. And then they got more confused, didn't they? Because as me and Tim have already broken down in detail, we all know what happened for the rest of the run. Then you had a load of people not doing enough distance on the run because Morgan Pearson had fucked off to do the
Fucked off, yeah.
Everyone got sent to the finish line. Everyone's arguing. It's one big mess. And what has interested me is that we disagree now.
Yeah.
Because you're saying that you want to see 13 people disqualified and 4 people finish. Now, I don't know. I say I disagree. I'm not sure we disagree because I don't know what the answer is. I don't know what I think because I'm not a technical official. I'm not someone in a position of authority to make these decisions. It's not my job. My job is to commentate on what I see. What I don't think should have happened was the vote being put to the athletes afterwards. I don't think that puts anybody in a good position. Certainly not the 4 people who did the appropriate race, who are going to feel pressured to vote in the sporting way when they could have won some money. So
a lot of money as well, yeah.
Yeah, you think that we should have seen 13 disqualifications and 4 finishes?
Yeah, and I think the problem I found with this was that there was definitely some intervention of some people have said, I think Sam Renouf said on that broadcast thing that it was a timing board issue that told them to go to the finish, or some people have said they were directed. That is really unclear to me, but the fact that Morgan completed the whole course, you then had Mika come in early, but then you also had Jason, who was behind Mika, still be able to continue and run the whole course. And so was Mika directed and Jason not directed? And if so, like, why was Jason not directed? So for me, everyone uses a bloody GPS watch. The run might be off by a touch, but if you're coming into the finish on an 18K run and it's saying, I think 14.6 or something like that, you've got another lap. It's as simple as that.
So what do you do? Let me push this back to you then. You're in a race, could be an Ironman, could be a T100. Do you have the fight in you to come down past for your final lap. In your head, you think you've got a final lap. Your GPS is telling you. The timing board's off, and a race official is saying, Andy, race over, go to the finish line. Do you have it in you to say, no, I've got another lap? Because that's the question. I mean, I get what you're saying objectively and logically, but put yourself in that position.
Honestly, I think I run to the finish.
Yeah.
But honestly, I
Then
again
should be disqualified.
very angrily think that I deserve to be disqualified because I didn't complete the course.
All right. So we're not putting the blame on the athletes.
No,
You're just saying the outcome should have been a DQ.
it's hard to tell because I think I would have been very, very confused if an official was trying to direct me down to a finishing chute, knowing that I'd counted the relaps correctly, seeing the distance on my watch. And I think it would have been very easy to run down the finish if I have the next athlete, say 20 seconds ahead of me, and they're running to the finish as well. I think it's very easy, a bit like you said with the bike, to just follow Hayden. I think it would be much easier to follow the athlete in front to the finish line because they're there. Oh, they're crossing the finish line. Okay, well, maybe I'm completely wrong here. But I still think there should have been more credit given to those that kind of said, screw it, this is what the course was outlined to us before the race. This is how many laps we were meant to do. I've done that many laps because I've counted them and I know I'm right, and committing to that. And you've got like a Jake Birtwistle who actually finished, did he finish last or second to last?
Yeah.
Who gets, I think it's the bottom payment is like $2,000
or 14 grand or something.
But he would have got 14 grand if if everyone else had got disqualified. In that sense, I personally feel like he deserves 14 grand because he did the course and no one else did.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Oh, it's difficult.
I think this should have been the outcome. I genuinely do not think it should have been a vote that the athletes were made.
No.
I think
Or
a T100 or a technical official or whoever the race referee should have been like, right, this is the decision. You're all having to abide by this.
And like, I don't even know how you do, because like if a technical official took control, I'm not even sure if they could do a hybrid of the two. So they gave the priority to the four that completed the full distance. And then Mika was, say, the next fastest at the end of the lap to go. So he then becomes fifth. And then down after that.
Off that. Yeah.
And almost have like a 2-tier finishing sheet. That's, to me, that
there you go.
Sense.
We just done it. We solved
it. I fixed it.
It's right on the letter. But it was chaos watching it unfold. For years we've been doing this podcast. We've had a Patreon group for the majority of that. This year, I have never had this many races where my phone has been exploding like this. For example, the women's race in Kona.
Yes.
The WTCS final with Cassandra and Beth and the eventual winner, whose name escapes me, despite having just talked about her a minute ago with Tim.
I've just had a mind blank there.
Lisa Tess.
That's the one.
And then this race here, which it's just been constant. And this was probably the most bemused I've ever seen the sport. You know, it was just a feed of people going, what is happening? Why is Mika finished? Why is he in first place?
Well, I love that. I think I posted it on my Instagram story. The Leonardo DiCaprio, like, can't remember what film it's from, but he's just like, Shutter Island, the pure disbelief of what's going on.
Yeah.
And it's like Morgan Pearson crossing the finishing line. It's just hilarious.
Oh, that's, have you seen his collection of finishing photos?
At nighttime.
Yeah. No, these actual finishing photos from when he finished.
Or he's like,
yeah. There's his Christmas card sorted, isn't it? Stick that on a card. Yeah, no, I cannot imagine how bemused he was, but my favourite finisher wasn't Morgan. Morgan was funny. My favourite finisher was the last place before Morgan finished, having done the right distance. Because this guy just finished. He sort of slowed to a walk. He took his glasses off and just kind of looked around bemused at this group of athletes arguing intensely at the finish. And he's like, what the fuck is this? What's happened? Because he's obviously well out of it. He hasn't been part of the extra bike loops. He doesn't know about the run.
To be fair, it must have been so confusing. And maybe even like a bit like with the extra laps on the bike, maybe something that should have been relayed to, the whole field. Like, so because it's such a small field, it would be really easy to notify that three athletes have done an extra loop on the bike, kind of thing. Sam Dickinson was confused as hell going into transition. It'd be like, Sam, don't worry, you're completely right. People have gone too far.
Yeah.
Off you go.
Yeah, you'd think there'd be somebody there dishing out information, don't you?
But I think and it's a weird spin. I've only just really kind of thought of it now, which I think, and I've heard a lot of negativity about T100 and kind of the inevitable downfall is kind of the way that people are phrasing kind of what had happened here and, other issues they've had this year. But I think what's been really interesting, just kind of talking it through with you, is actually that sometimes you need weird and like bad and terrible things to kind of transcend the sport a little bit. And actually, this could actually turn out to be quite a good thing for T100 and for the sport. And the way I'm looking at it now is that I was on a stag do with people who have zero interest in triathlon. That my friends from school, they not really into sport. But when I started explaining what had happened, they too were kind of thought it was funny. They were interested in it. I was showing them kind of the funny memes that were coming out, and a group of people who have no necessary interest in triathlon as a pure sport have kind of bought into that media aspect of like the utter chaos. And I think what T100 are trying to do with the expansion of the sport, especially the media side of the sport, which is what they've always tried to push, you sometimes need these, I think you need these kind of chaotic moments in sport to kind of transcend a little bit. And I think you go even think about Ironman. I can't remember the exact lady, but I think it was at Julie Moss who was kind of collapsing across the finishing line. And those kind of moments do, in a bad way, they do then kind of have a massive promotional benefit to Ironman, to T100, to triathlon as a sport. So my brain has now started to shift to, well, actually, could this chaos have been a good thing?
No news is bad news, Topper.
Yeah.
Broken out the echo chamber, though.
I think it has. I think it definitely is. It's a very triathlon-centric community that are kind of outraged by it. But I think the utter chaos, I think, has broken out a little bit. I think the utter chaos at Kona with Lucy and Taylor broke out of the triathlon sphere a little bit, which kind of, the long term state of the sport, I'm all for. I think in a weird way. I do think that there's many negatives. The PTO, they're meant to be a professional organization, and they kind of amateur hour in a few situations recently. But I also know that they're young and they are going to learn from this and hopefully make some much, much better choices in the future. But yeah, it's a difficult one because, I wouldn't say I'm necessarily a massive T100 fan, but if it brings money to the sport, if it brings fans to the sport, and it helps to increase the sport, I kind of do want it to succeed. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people kind of are enjoying seeing its maybe downfall in the last week or so. What's your thoughts there?
Yeah, I do not revel in these sort of things happening. I think I want the T100 to do well. I want them to achieve their objective of raising the bar and expanding the audience base and bringing investment into the sport and all the things they say they want to do. I want that to happen. So I don't revel in it. I just think it needed a good dissection. It needed talking about, and they will learn from it. I know a lot of the people at the T100 organization. I got a lot of time for them. They're good people trying to do a good job. So yeah, I just think lessons need to be learned, and I'm sure they will be. I feel like I'm giving a very political answer here.
No, I think it's difficult not to, because like, I'm not trying to sit on any fences or anything like that, but I think my honest opinion is, if we don't want long distance triathlon as a sport to succeed, why are we sitting on this podcast chatting right now?
Yeah.
If we want to see everything, collapse and fall to pieces, we'll start a podcast about a different sport, because
Some men just want to see the world burn, mate.
some people are a bit psychopathic.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think, look, this, as I said with Tim Hemming a minute ago, hopefully this is just a speed bump, and they do learn from this, and it doesn't happen again. And there will be lessons learned into how communication happens with athletes, how on-course laps are dealt with, how clarity is shown when it's time to come in on the bike or not, how athletes are drilled into them, whether it's their responsibility to count the laps, and that courses aren't exact, GPSs aren't exact. Combine those two levels of non-exact, and you can get quite a gulf between what you're expecting and what you delivered.
Yeah, the lap thing is a big issue, and I think they've shown it with the French Riviera race that they can do an exciting non-looped course. So I'm hoping that they realize that a little bit more, and kind of try and get away from these laps. I do think that when T100 sit down at the end of this year, they will have to make some, or not make. They're going to have some very, very hard conversations, I think. But I am optimistic that those hard conversations can be had and can be, I think from an outsider, and I've got no affiliation with sort of the T100 whatsoever, but from an outsider, I think it sometimes seems that they kind of don't face things front on, and in the moment, whereas I think, Ironman, for example, right now are seemingly trying to kind of be that person where there's an issue, we face it front on kind of thing.
Yeah, like they're doing with the age group qualification.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Very quickly.
And I'd love to see a little bit more of that with T100, just because, we can't have another year of race venues moving, race dates moving, athletes not fulfilling contracts, and race disasters like we had at the weekend. We need a higher level of professionalism, and they are striving for it. And as you said, like, they're great people.
Open and honest communication.
Yeah, when we just need those hard conversations to be had. Like, well, how the fuck do we not make sure these things don't happen again? So yeah, that'd be my opinion on that.
I would tend to agree. Yeah, I think there's a lot of changes that need to be made, and they will be. I'm quite sure. Ironman Arizona also happened this weekend. What were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, good race. Shame we couldn't have coverage, because I think always watching a race through the Tracker app is never that exciting. But yeah, no, really impressive performance by Mina Koolhaas. Completely just dominated some bike and run. He was just, he was in control the whole way through the swim. Never kind of relinquished control on the bike, and then just ran a 2:35 marathon, which it's not a flat course. I did it back in 2022. There's a couple of little horrible hills, a bit of running on like a dirt track as well. So, yeah, super impressive. You had then Sam Long, just before I think he's just literally announced today that he's had another boy.
Yeah.
In the last day or so. So to bag a quick silver and a Kona slot, a day or two before your baby came is pretty good going. I respect that as a father. And then rounding off the podium, Ben Canute, which is definitely his best result this year.
And yeah, after Marbella as well. Great to bounce off that.
Yeah, no, super impressive. And then on the ladies' side of the sport, we had Simone Daly, which is her name now, which used to be Simone Mitchell. She took her first Ironman win since Ironman Wales in 2019, because I was an age grouper in that race, and she ran past me on the run.
Lots of people do, mate.
Yeah. And then it was Rachel Zelinskas in second, and I'm doing this off the top of my head, so I hope you're impressed. And in third place, I've now completely screwed it, because I've completely got a mind blank.
Elisabetta Corridor from
That's the one, yeah. So I think it was 3 Kona slots of both male and female. So I think that's super good. I think it's a nice, especially with all the pro series and chaos that is, a pro season next year. It's nice for those athletes to bank a slot and just kind of have that pressure taken away. And by all accounts, I really enjoyed racing in Arizona. It's a fun race. So yeah.
And so, mate, we're coming to the end of the year. Have you had a good year? Do you feel like your year's gone well? What's next year got in it for you?
Yeah, that is a conversation actually for tomorrow. I'm sitting down with my coach. Gonna gonna start really making some plans. I think I've definitely got a big eye on Kona. I think in the male side of the sport, especially the biggest challenge these days is getting the slot there. So the season will definitely have an air of trying to bank that slot. Um, a secondary goal is they bring in a male pro race back to Ironman Wales in September. And being a South Walian, yeah, I've definitely got a big eye on that. I think it's one of those races that I would, if I was to able to take the crown there, that would probably, beat most things in a professional career for most people because it's that sort of home race element to it.
Yeah.
So that's definitely got a big eye on, and I'd be going there, all in really. And then I think then third goal would be potentially trying to complete the Ironman Pro Series. But I'm not sure how I would achieve that necessarily, because there's only so much racing you can do in a year, especially with full distances. So I'm gonna have to speak to my coach a little bit more and work out what is possible. But yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm motivated. I'm feeling a little bit unfit after having 9-10 days now without any training. I'd done a couple of little bits, but I'm feeling kind of very excited to get back to it.
I'm in the same boat, mate. Came back from Marbella and got a cold. I haven't run for 10 days now, so I feel like all my fitness is gone and it's no longer worth it
It's
anymore.
just like riding a bike, mate. A couple of days, you'll be fine.
Yeah. All right, mate. Well, look, I appreciate you coming on and have a chat. I really value your opinion. Obviously, it's all well and good for someone like me to voice what I think about what happened in Dubai, but I'm interested to get the opinion of someone who actually races at that kind of level. Where can people find you if they wanna have a chat and find out more about Horsey T?
Yeah, best place to find me is on Instagram, Andrew_H_T. And yeah, my DMs are always open and I'm pretty responsive to messages. So
Slide into his DMs. See what you find. All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening. If you want to support the show, jump on at patreon.com/talking triathlon. If you want to follow Tim, he's at T100 on Instagram. He's not here, but he's worth a follow. I'm at bale.james85 on Instagram. We are on Instagram as at Talking Triathlon. You can join the Patreon group, access to the monthly bonus episodes, the social groups, the Patreon WhatsApp group, which burns across weekends like this that's just happened. It was incredible. If you're not a member of the Patreon group though, and you want to leave a comment or anything, then best place to do that is on the YouTube channel, because we see them and we're more than likely to respond and have a chat.
perfect.
All right, mate. Well, you look after yourself, eh?
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Cheerio.